Should we replace 20-year-old capacitors as a blanket rule? Many look just fine from the outside. I've always wondered about the answer. Today we're checking out a nifty tool. It can do many things, but I'm especially interested in the ability to test and measure capacitors. Recently I got into soldering and having a go at repairing old computer parts. And well, capacitors are always a hot topic. Here we have a good example. This is a socket 939 OEM motherboard. It's in excellent condition. It has just a little bit of dust, otherwise it's pristine. But now it's over 20 years old. The capacitors look good. Here we can see them near the CPU socket. They are rated at 6.3 volts, 1500 microfarad. These are Panasonic FC series. There are three other ones. These are 16 volts, also 1500 microfarads, Panasonic FJ series. Now personally, I don't think a recap is necessary. The board works fine. Why mess with something that works? But yeah, what do you think? Here's another example. This is an ATI Radeon X300 SE Hyper Memory. This card will actually feature in a video very soon. It completed all the benchmarks and games ran without any issues. We can see there are three caps, 10 volts, 470 microfarads from Nichicon HC series. Again, they look good, no bulging, but considering the age, over 20 years, well, should we replace them? What do you think? To shed some light on the topic, let's check out the ZOYI ZT-MD2 Smart Digital Tweezers. It can auto-identify resistors, capacitors, and inductors, measuring the values with a maximum frequency of 100 kHz and supporting sweep frequency. It can also test diodes, continuity, DC voltage, and comes with a signal generator. As always, disclosure, this is a free review sample that I requested and I do get to keep it. So let's begin, and I want to measure a few brand new capacitors that I recently purchased. Here we have some SMD polymer caps. These are rated at 16 volts and 180 microfarad. Here is the datasheet, 16 volts, 180 microfarad. These are the dimensions, and we can see we have a ESR of only 16 milliohms. Up here we can see the ESR is measured between 100 and 300 kilohertz. In the user manual, it mentions that measuring larger capacitors, you should use a low frequency. So I set the device to 100 Hertz, and yeah, it's showing just under 180 microfarads, spot on with the specifications. To measure ESR, I reconfigure the frequency to 100 kilohertz, and here we go. I'm getting a reading of around 3 milliohms, so this is much lower than what's on the datasheet. But in general, having a lower ESR is a good thing. But I'm still curious why there is such a difference. Maybe the datasheet is sort of showing the worst case scenario. Let's test another one. This is a through-hole capacitor, 10 volts, 470 microfarads. Let's have a look at the datasheet. These are from Panasonic FC series. 10 volts, 470 microfarads. We can see an ESR of 117 milliohm. Let's measure the capacity at 100 Hertz. It shows 450 microfarads, so that's very close. And for ESR, again, we are getting a lower value than the datasheet. It's measuring just around 80 milliohms. Next up, we have an electrolytic SMD cap, 6.3 volts, 470 microfarads. Here is the datasheet. 6.3 volts, 470. We have an ESR of 17 milliohms. For capacity, we are measuring 500 microfarads, so that's checking out. And for ESR at 100 kilohertz, I got around 112 milliohm. Again, this is better than what's on the datasheet and not too far off. And next up are some high-performance SMD polymer caps. 6.3 volts, 470 microfarads. Here we have the datasheet, 6.3 volts, 470 microfarads, and we have an ESR very low of only 12 milliohm. Let's see what we can measure. We're getting 430 microfarads. That's a little bit lower, but within the 20% tolerance of this particular capacitor. For ESR, I measured around 9 milliohm, so that's pretty close to the rated 12 milliohms from the datasheet. And we have one more brand new capacitor I want to test. This one is an electrolytic through-hole cap, 25 volts, 470 microfarads from Rubicon, the ZLH series. Here we have the datasheet, 25 volts, 470 microfarads, and we have an ESR of only 39 milliohm. That's very low for an electrolytic capacitor. Let's do the measurements. I'm seeing around 460 microfarads, again very close to the specifications. The ESR measures around 15 milliohms at 100 kilohertz. So that's very low. It's a good thing. So these caps can do well with video cards, replacing ultra-low ESR capacitors. And now let's take a look at some older capacitors that I've desoldered. The first one, this is coming from a Radeon 9550. This is an old school AGP video card. Over 20 years old. Well, we can see it's bulging at the top. Let's look at the label. 10 volts, 1000 microfarads. It's a KZG series. Let's see if we can find a datasheet. Here we go. It's a capacitor from United Chemicon, ultra low impedance. 10 volts, 1000 microfarad. We have an ESR of only 26 milliohms. That is very, very low. This capacitor obviously needs replacing. Let's see what the tweezer measures. Here we go, just under 3 nanofarads. So yeah, this one is dead, Jim. Here we have 4 capacitors that I desoldered from a Radeon X600 XT. Let's look at the markings. 10 volts, 470 microfarads. Let's find a datasheet. These are from Nishikon HC series low impedance. Ours came with 10 volts and then 470 microfarads. So the ESR 30 milliohms. The capacitors all look fine, no bulging, but they are over 20 years old. So I'm really curious if we measure anything off. Let's go for the capacity first. The first cap around 480, that's great. The second capacitor I'm seeing around 490, again, excellent. The third one around 480 and the last one 485. So in terms of capacity, all 4 seem to check out just fine. Let's measure the ESR. The first one we have around 11 milliohms. Next one is around 13 milliohms. The third capacitor I see a reading of around 11 milliohms. And the last one has the highest rating of 15 milliohms. Well, this is really interesting. All 4 caps, despite being over 20 years old, they check out just fine in terms of capacity, but also the ESR is still very low. So all in all, the capacity measurements checked out really well. Everything measured within specifications. With the ESR, I measured a lower result across the board for every capacitor compared to the datasheet, especially with the polymer caps. Maybe it's because these are very low ESR and it gets more difficult to measure. With the electrolytic caps, they have a higher ESR. Here, I also measured a lower ESR compared to the datasheet, but the gap was much smaller. And now let's go over the other functions of this very nifty gadget. In auto mode, it can intelligently identify between measuring resistors, capacitors, or inductors, but of course you can also manually choose the mode that you want to use. There's a test for diodes identifying the polarity and also the forward voltage, and a continuity measurement with a beeper function. It can measure DC voltage only, so AC is not supported. The user manual talks about plus minus 16 volts, but on the screen it's displaying plus minus 32. Very interesting is the frequency sweep function from 100 Hz to 100 kHz. It cycles through all the frequencies, builds a table, and you can see how the results change depending on the frequency. We have a signal generator supporting sine, square, triangle, staircase, half wave, full wave, noise wave. Now the sine wave supports up to 100 kilohertz. The other ones can go up to 10 kilohertz, and you can also adjust the amplitude and the duty cycle. I've updated the firmware, which is really easy. There is a supplied USB cable that helps you with that, and there's also some PC software that you can install to interact with the device. In the box, and be aware there are slightly different bundles when you buy this product. It comes in two colors, red and gray. In mine was a case for the device. There's a user manual, and I recommend you do study that because these 4 buttons, some of them have long press and short press and double press, so definitely study the manual. We get a USB-C to USB-A cable for charging, updating the firmware, and running the PC software. And here we have a device for calibrating the gadget. There is an option in the settings where you can do that. In terms of prices, well, they vary a little bit between the regions. In the US, it's a little bit higher, just over $40. If you look in the video description, I will do my best to put links for all the regions down below if you are interested. So guys, I think this is a very nifty gadget. I studied a few other YouTube reviews out there from other channels, and they're all positive. So I think this is a nifty device to have in your toolkit. I've only tested a few capacitors because I wanted to get the video out the door, but so far capacitors from established Japanese brands that look visually good, they seem to be testing just fine, holding up the capacity but also the low ESR. And well, if they're blown, then absolutely they need replacing. I would love to hear what you think. At what point do you consider replacing capacitors in old computer parts? Do you just go by the visuals, or do you also replace them based on age, even if they look perfectly fine and the part works in games and benchmarks? I'm really curious, so leave your thoughts down below. And that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to read your comments about this one. And that's it. Thank you for watching. I shall see you soon with another one.